Hey everyone, Seth Jones here, live at the Visual Arts Academy in studio. And if you've been seeing any of our promotions, you will know how incredibly excited Chad and I are to be going live tonight because we have two incredibly special guests. You may not even realize how special these guests are. But first and foremost, we've got Chad Nuss here from the Visual Arts Academy as well. He's going to moderate and talk and do a lot of great things today. But we also have with us, we have Charles Pate Jr. out of Greenville, South Carolina. And then we also have Mitchel Coffman out of New York. And these two gentlemen are award-winning artists, and they're just two of the most intelligent, special people I've ever met in my entire life. They're writers, they're painters, actors. I think in one case, Mitch, you know, you've got that short film that was brilliant. Charles is a sculptor. He runs a gallery down there. Just two multifaceted individuals. And I'm telling you, 2 hours is not long enough to talk to these guys. And as we dive into this, we want you to ask questions. You're going to see Charles is working on some sculptural work. We've got Chad, who's doing a large format drawing. We've got Mitch, who's going to explain his oil painting process. I'm working on some glazes, and we're going to throw it around here in a second and let them explain what they're working on. But ask questions. Let us know you're here. Get engaged. If you've got your sketch pad out, if you've got your canvas out, if you've got a sculpture or something, we want you working with us. So we're so glad you've joined us today, and we're going to kick this around. Mitch, why don't you go first for us? Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're working on, your process, and give us some insight as to what you're going to be working on for the next 2 hours.
Sure. So, thanks for having me. First and foremost, it's good to see all you guys again. So tonight I'm going to be working on this huge painting behind me. It is of a locker from Firehouse 10 in New York City. That's the firehouse that's right across the street from the World Trade Center. My body of work that it's a part of is inspired by Special Force military friends that I have and their deployment stories from the Global War on Terror. And I've been working on that body of work for just about 9 years now. And this painting is a part of it. I've made a whole bunch of paintings, like I said, about the Special Force operators that I know, Army Rangers, Navy SEALs, Marine Raiders. And as I got towards the end of the last piece, I branched out and decided to include some firefighters in the mix since, you know, a lot of us consider 9/11 starting with the World Trade, you know, the World Trade Center. So I got lucky enough that one of my neighbors is actually a firefighter at the firehouse.
Oh, wow.
And I took a bunch of pictures, and here we are. So,
and you're working in oils, correct?
Yes, sir.
Excellent. Chuck Peasy, Charles Pate, you want to give us a little rundown of what you've got going on?
Sure. Yeah. I'm a sculptor and painter. I try and juggle both of those sides of my art career. And right now I'm working on a pretty traditional sculpture of some turkey. I've got 2 female and a male turkey that I'm working on. And you can see this one in the background here that's getting kind of close to done. And then this one doesn't look like much yet, but I've already worked on the armature, and now I'm just covering it with clay. And then, you know, after all that's done, I'll take it to the foundry, and it'll be bronze when it's finished.
That's fantastic. And if you've been watching any of our live sessions, you've seen Chad work on many different things. But Chad, what are you going to be working on today?
Yeah, so, well, first of all, Seth, of course, it's always good to be on here with you, and I'm super excited about our special guests. I am continuing to work on my what I call apocalyptic landscape. I'll just try and scan it a little bit over here so you can see the whole landscape. But yeah, so I'm just continuing on up in this corner, working on some boulders of this mountain that's just kind of caving in into this valley. And so I'm working with some vine charcoal, got a coal pencil, some blenders and paintbrushes to give it a nice smooth texture. So that's what I'll be working on tonight.
That's awesome. And I am working on my continued portrait of my daughter, Cora. And I've been trying to do a grisaille, which I've never done one this size or in this style. Mitch is laughing. And I'm actually now transitioning over to the glazes. And I have done glazes in the past, but Chad has pushed me to say, hey, do the full glazes on this thing here. And so I'm really working on this. This is a big learning experience for me, but it's been a blast. And so we're going to continue to work. We've got 2 hours of work time here. I'm always surprised at how much we actually get done. But before we dive into that, I've got to give you the background. So most of you may not know this, But Mitch, Charles, and I, we all attended the Savannah College of Art and Design over 20 some odd years ago, or quite 20 years ago. And we all played lacrosse together. And this is, I literally just, guys, you'll love this. I just had a meeting, Chad and I just had a meeting with a young lady. She has a chance to potentially play D1 soccer, but she wants to be an artist. And if she doesn't go D1 to the school she wants to, she absolutely wants to attend the Savannah College of Art and Design, where she can be what we were, which is artist athletes. And these guys, we sweat together, we bled together. It was a unique experience. We taught artists that artists can also be athletes, which was also a unique experience. But these are two men and a whole group of other guys. I wish Craiggles could be here and all these other guys, and maybe we'll get these guys on. But it's such an honor to have both of you joining us here at our Visual Arts Academy and studio. I can't thank you enough for doing it. And it's just amazing that we're still having these kind of conversations so many years later. So thank you both. This is one of the coolest moments I've had in many, many years.
Yeah, man. It's
Glad to
awesome.
be here.
I feel like you need to also say that we're the people that started that team too. Like,
Yes.
let's be honest here. We're old now. That was
We are old. Well, and it's really quite funny because I think, Charles, you were the only one out of the three of us that had any lacrosse experience, correct?
Barely.
Yeah, barely. So Mitch was actually a football player. And if you guys think he's fit and huge now, you should have seen him when he was much younger. He was one of the biggest dudes I've ever seen in my life. And then
that's it.
And I was a baseball player and a gymnast. And then there was, I think we still call it the original 8. Is that right, guys? Is it kind of the original 8? There were some guys that kind of helped out and then guys that kind of dropped off, but the original 8. And we were very, very fortunate that we were there to be able to help build the lacrosse program at the Savannah College of Art and Design, which is still running 20 some odd years later. And it was just a phenomenal experience to be able to be an artist and an athlete, because at that time, you weren't really given the opportunity to be both. And I think it's amazing now. I literally just made a comment earlier today that we are still all professional artists, right? Even though we were athletes, our main goal in life was to develop art, to be artists, to be mentors, to encourage others, and to continue to paint, draw, sculpt, and write. And that's something that's unique because, Chuck, you recently have been doing some comic artwork as well, haven't you?
Yeah, I don't know how many younger aspiring artists will tune into this, but one piece of advice I would give somebody is that no matter what even if you have a job that you love and you're passionate about, lots of days are just a grind. And like, it doesn't matter how beautiful the project might be. You can't live on inspiration alone. You got to just grind it out. Absolutely. So part of the way I manage that is I save myself. I do lots of just fun art projects that are not money makers. I have my career, all my income comes from art, but I do a lot of fun things like just because it will be cool to me. And so I made a comic book. I have a 9-year-old son, and I made a comic book about dinosaurs that fight crime and like carry weapons and stuff. And like, it was just a fun passion project. I was like, my 9-year-old will think I'm cool if I do this. I'm doing it. So we do that, and we make little Star Wars movies with like pretty solid special effects for a home video, and just things like that I kind of keep me inspired, keep my hands busy. And then I can come back to, maybe a portrait of a kid that I was not especially pumped about painting.
Well, and guys, we've gotten so many people. For everybody that's joining us on Instagram, thank you guys for joining us. We've got a couple comments. Love it. This is so cool. Awesome. Really great feedback. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Let us know you're here. Ask about the different processes. We're very fortunate that we have 4 very different creative styles and processes happening. Make sure that you guys engage, ask questions. Let us know you're here. We're going to be going on for some time. And on that vein, though, Chuck, you sculpt, you've done some comics, you've written a children's book, which we're very fortunate. We actually have one of his original drawings from his children's book here in the Academy. It's gorgeous. The pen and ink work is absolutely amazing. It's so cool. We have one of Mitch's paintings here in the Academy, guys, and it's front and center right next to one of Alvarez's etchings. It's in a place of honor. Chad, you walk by it every day, don't you? You see that boxing glove every single day. And we're also fortunate that we have some of Chad's artwork up in the Academy as well, some pages from his 2 graphic novels that he's done and produced. But Mitch, you're multifaceted as well. And I love how Charles was talking about, sometimes you've got to do the grind. Sometimes you do some things that are creative. but I was absolutely blown away by your short film. I didn't know. I always knew that you had a strong personality and you were very animated in a lot of ways. But man, that was a spectacular experience. What was it like to branch out from painting and to go into something in that vein? Was that really a stretch, or did it just kind of come natural to you?
Well, it just kind of came naturally, I guess. It was kind of like I could compare it to us becoming college athletes, you know. It's kind of like that. Just jump in head first, you know. It was a fun experience. I learned a lot through it, and you know, it's like Charles was talking about, like challenging yourself creatively is a big part of all of this, you know. And I feel like our athletic background is really similar, just the same thing, like just challenging ourselves constantly, pushing the envelope, seeing where our creativity can take us. It's really important to do that, because I feel like so many people get stuck, like Charles is saying, you know, like they get stuck doing the same thing over and over again, and that's boring to me. So yeah. It was fun. I mean, during the process, like I also learned that permits in New York City are a thing, because the police were called on us during shooting.
Oh man.
But it was awesome. I still have a little bit of speed left, so we got away. But I don't know if I should say that on here or not. But, yeah, man, it was a really fun process. And then, you know, having the first time I ever made a film, being selected into a couple of film festivals, that was a really cool thing to be a part of also.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Was that film something that you had come up with? How did that project start?
Yeah, so I've wanted to get into film for a long time. It was actually recommended that I take film for grad school instead of painting. But as we all know, that would have set me back a couple of years and a lot more dollars. So I passed on that. So I started writing some stuff with actually one of our teammates, Stu Yost. He works in film right now, and he's in LA doing an awesome job. We started writing stuff together, and you know, just to get some more experience, I really wanted to try making a film on my own first and see how difficult it was and learn the process a little bit more. So I did it.
That is something, you know, you just kind of mentioned this, and I've talked to Chad about this before, and you know, obviously we all went to school with Thomas, who is, you know, the co-founder of this academy. But it's amazing to think about all of our teammates who have succeeded exceptionally well in the creative arts. I mean, aren't you guys blown away by that? Like, you know, Plenty as an architect, we've got all these other, we got Stu, we've got all these guys that are doing just amazing stuff. It's amazing to think that it's a lifelong journey, right? It's not something that most of us just went in and said, oh yeah, we're going to go study art, we're going to kind of do this or that. This has been a lifelong passion. And for a lot of our students here at the Academy, it's the beginning of their journey, right, Charles? You know what I mean? Like, they are still at the early stages. They're beginning that process, trying to figure out, how do I keep my passion for the arts alive? How do I go about this? Where do I go from it? But then the other thing that we've talked about, and Chad, back me up on this if you agree or disagree, we have a ton of students that come in that are later in life or at a different stage in life going, I used to love painting, I used to love sculpting, I used to love doing this, and I got away from it for 25, 30 years, and now I get a chance to do it again. And I think that's just absolutely spectacular that we are giving an opportunity for people to do that. But how fortunate are we that this is what we are able to do for our livelihood, and it's just it's an exceptional experience. But we want to talk about a lot of things. Ask us questions, guys. Get in here and dive in. We're going to share some stories, but I do have one quick thing that I want to dive into really fast. Charles, do you mind? I don't know if you're in a place, but could you show us, before we jumped on, guys, Chuck just picked up and he showed us a maquette that he was working on, and it is absolutely spectacular. This is a gorgeous, gorgeous maquette. You may need to explain what a maquette is, and if you don't mind diving into that a little bit, but guys, wait till you see what he's about to show us. I think even Chad and I were like, wow, that's spectacular.
Yeah, let's do the whole tour. So in my studio, I have a gallery, I have a studio, and I have like a sculpture studio and a painting studio. And here in the sculpture studio, I've got a lot of just stuff around. This is the dirtiest of the places that I work. And a lot of times when I'm trying to win a job, or if I've already talked to a client and we have a proposal and we're going to do something really big, I'm going to do a 10-foot sculpture. what we need to do first is a maquette. We do a miniature to get approval, because that's where you're going to really, if you're going to make a mistake, you need to make it when it's small. Okay. So over here, I've got several that some of these became full-size sculptures. Some of these didn't, but here's versions of that. This is one that's in downtown Greenville, where I live. And then this might be a short tour. I think I plugged my computer. All right, so here's the gallery here. So we've got paintings on the walls here, my gallery. And this is the sculpture that I was just talking about. And I had proposed this, and heartbroken that it didn't get picked. I got picked as a finalist, which was a big, big honor to be picked as like one of the final three. But then ultimately didn't get picked. But this is a cool story of a guy from South Carolina. He was born a slave, and he escaped. He stole this ship, and this is him here holding the steering wheel, and he stole the ship, rescued his wife and kids and a few other people, and escaped, and then helped the Union Army navigate the South Carolina coast because he knew it so well. And then he came back to South Carolina after all this was over, and he was elected a senator of South Carolina. So I had both versions, the young and the old version of him in this sculpture. And then all these little panels on the base. So yeah, that's what I had been working on. You win some, you lose some. I mean, I still got a pretty cool little portfolio piece, I guess, for that maquette, but
I think it's a phenomenal piece. But if you don't mind, I think a lot of our students, and we've got a few, we had a few questions kind of asking.
Sure.
They're going, what do you mean you submitted, right? So talk about that. What does that mean? Does it mean that there's like, is it a jury? Is it a commission piece? Will you explain a little bit about what that is? Because we have two questions here. One is asking, what do you mean you were rejected? Which I think that's, if you're not an artist person, you may not know what that means, right? But then the other question is, well, if you came in third, what happens? Or what happened, I suppose, is what they mean by that. So do you mind talking about that process a little bit? If you're not familiar with the professional world, and especially public works, right? You may not know this. So if you don't mind, Charles, tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So the way I get my business, I do have some gallery space, but pretty much for me personally, this is unique to me. So one thing I would say just about the art world and being a professional artist is that it's different for a lot of people. And that's one thing I learned being a professional, and Mitch can tell you this too. Like when you're in art school, I think professors, even like well-intentioned professors, have a view of how they think it's supposed to be. And they'll say, this is how you become a professional artist. And then once you're in the real world, it's different. I mean, people sell a million little things on Etsy for $1 a piece. Yep. People sell one giant installation for $1 million, and there's everything in between. There are people who have only gallery representation. There are people who do only commissions, and that's kind of my work. I have some things on the walls here at my gallery, but my business is not a lot of window shopping. Almost all of my business is people who come to me with a plan, and they say, we have this budget and we want this sculpture or this painting. And so that's how I get most of my jobs. If it is a commission and somebody comes to me, they saw something I did somewhere else, and they researched who did it and they like it and they come to me, that's obviously the easiest job to win. It's already mine. But there are jobs that I just hear about, and it'll be like public money. That one that I just showed you was for the state capitol building here in South Carolina. And so they had some money, a budget, and they had a plan, and they sent out a public request for qualifications and portfolio and resume and all that stuff. And so I submitted it all, my resume and my history and my biography and my budget, what I proposed for the budget. And then I got picked with two other artists to make the miniature. So at that point, I had not made a sculpture yet. I had not made the maquette yet.
It was just a proposal at that point, right? So it was just a proposal and some of your previous work to kind of show them your capabilities, right?
Right. And honestly, I think that's the hardest part. I mean, especially for a young artist. I mean, I'm not super young, but I'm younger than a lot of the artists I'm competing against. And black and white resume, I think, is just text on paper is probably the worst version of me. But I think the work was good, and so anyway, I submitted the miniature, and so did these two other artists, and then a committee voted on it and ultimately picked somebody else. And
I still think it's a beautiful work, and thank you so much for sharing it with that, because again, there's certain things I talk about this with all my students, and Chad does the same thing, Thomas does as well. Is everybody, to your point, everybody's experience is different, right? So everybody has those different processes, those different experiences. But Mitch, you recently had something kind of similar, right? Like, I got to see it on your social media, and if you guys don't follow these guys, please make sure you go to all their social media outlets. Their work is absolutely spectacular. You will be blown away and motivated and encouraged. But Mitch, are you okay sharing a little bit about your recent experience? Because Charles did that for a public work that was sculpture based, but you had something kind of close to that same thing, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. It was a memorial that the New York City was going to build for veterans, like a veterans memorial. And it was kind of similar to what Charles went through. There was an open call request for qualifications. I recently did a memorial for a military base. I painted portraits of Army Rangers for Hunter Army Airfield. And that took a couple of years to complete. And kind of like Charles, like my resume, I thought it was gonna do the trick, but there's people who've done nothing but sculpture their entire career. And I'm a painter, but I have done sculpture, and my concept was a really big sculpture. I actually put the time-lapse video on my Instagram feed. You can see.
Amazing.
And it was humongous, and I was really pumped about it. And now even though I didn't get selected, just like Charles, the piece is now a part of the collection that I'm working on. So there's no lost time. And I don't ever get caught up and get mad about that kind of stuff. You just have to keep moving. Just because it didn't resonate with one group, that doesn't mean it's not going to do that with somebody else. So there's no lost time. You can't get caught up in that stuff. So
absolutely. There's so many questions I want to talk about. There's so many different things.
Sure. Can I jump in and ask Mitch something real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course.
As part of your collection, does that mean you still are planning to? You just mean like your proposal, or do you have a plan to actualize your concept?
So the plan now is I'm gonna just make that like a painting.
Okay, cool.
That I'm turning that into a painting.
Okay.
Part of this, but I would love to be able to make a sculpture of it still, because it's so powerful.
Lots of people have asked me about shopping around my idea to a different place. Like maybe it doesn't go in the state capitol, but is there a different, a smaller municipality that would want that? And especially with your concept, Mitch, and with the veteran stuff, I think that could go in Mobile, Alabama, or whoever, I don't know where, wherever there is a Air Force or a contingency of veterans. So
absolutely.
Yeah, you never know, because it's a universal thing. The subject matter is the kit stand. So, it's a fallen soldier's helmet, vest, boots. It's very similar to a battlefield cross, but it's not a battlefield cross.
Right.
So yeah, it can go to, it can go to a bunch of different places if necessary or need be.
Chad and I talk a lot about just in general about when you have a great concept like that, that you are passionate about and you really, really believe in, you want to see it come to fruition, right? You want to have it come to fruition. And I think that's really important, because when you express it, if you do something you love, we talk about this a lot, when you do something you're passionate about, and when you have that drive and that motivation, and if you give it your best, other people are going to like it as well. I truly believe that, right? Like if you give it your all and you believe in it and you like it, you're going to, we talk that, who's the famous composer? Chad, you're going to have to help me on this. Who do I talk about all the time? The musical composer.
Like modern?
Rick Rubin. Rick, he talks a lot about, he makes music that he knows he likes, because the world's a small enough place that other people are going to like it too. But I think that when you guys have, passions like this, and if it doesn't come to fruition in one regards, it still can be something that is actualized in a different facet or a different way. And I love hearing about that. And that's great. We've got a comment that says, love seeing all the different work. So do we. This is what's really great about it, is you're getting to see 4 artists working live on 4 very different pieces. And we hope that you're working live with us. And we've got so much to talk about. I almost think 2 hours is not nearly going to be enough time. But I do want to bring something up, because all 4 of us here have 4 very unique, different ways that we came to art. Because Charles, your dad is an artist, correct? Your dad has been an artist for his entire life, and you were kind of born and raised into it. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I want you to talk about that in a second. Mitch, your dad is an artist, or I apologize, was an artist, but his fruition of that came at a different time in life, right? And
Yep.
Chad, we've talked about yours, how yours kind of came to fruition. What was it like for you as an artist and your journey? How was that different? Were you heavily influenced by those people? You know, what was it like, Charles, to grow up with such a creative dad, to have somebody who just cultivated in that from the beginning? Did you feel like it was unique, and did you know it was unique, or did it just feel like everyday life?
I didn't know it was unique. I mean, that people say, like, did your dad teach you a bunch of stuff? And I don't think he did that. I mean, there wasn't a lot of like lessons I got from him, but it definitely was unique in that I grew up knowing that artist was a job. You know, when I was like 4 years old, it's like, what kind of jobs are there? And you're like, a fireman and a policeman and a fine artist. Those were the 3 I thought were it, you know? And, you know, and then you go to art school, and a lot of people are there, and like their parents are not happy about it a little bit. Yeah. So I'm definitely like having supportive parents that were just believed that it could work and believed that I had the ability to do it. That was super helpful. And then I got to see it a bunch. My dad has an awesome book collection, like art history book collection and stuff, like just phenomenal 600-page, like full color Degas, like original, like just really fine art collection of books. And so, you know, I grew up looking at those and stuff.
Well, I remember when we first met many, many years ago, I was blown away by your confidence in the art fields. Does that make sense? Like you just had this notion, like, yes, you can be a fine artist professionally. Like you're like, that can be done. I've seen it. I know it. And I remember being scared to death, thinking, oh my gosh, how am I ever going to make a career? You know, like it was a different mindset, because I have multiple creative people in my family, but nobody was ever a professional artist, right? And in fact, it was kind of like what you said. It was like, hey, this is a big leap to go to art school, right? This is a big leap, you know, to try to do this professionally. But Mitch, your experience was a little different, right? I mean, so you have Charles, who has that kind of perspective. You know, what was your perspective on it?
Yeah, it's really, mine's multifaceted, because my dad went to art school in the 60s. And then when he was done, he worked with like a gallery for a little while. And he gave up on his art career. And I grew up in a house where he always told me to never give up on this thing, because you'll regret it for the rest of your life. And that was how I grew up. And when he saw that, you know, I had the chops, if you will, early on to draw, he knew that I'm so competitive. You guys know that about me. I'm like, I have a hard time with authority as well, to put it lightly, I guess.
I was going to say that's lightly.
He knew that, you know, he could try to teach me how to do stuff, but it probably wouldn't click, because we would just argue the whole time. So he sent me to work with an illustrator when I was a kid, and on the weekends instead of playing sports. And, you know, a lot came from that. That was where my foundation came from. So, yeah, man, that grit has been in me forever. And I really think that's like an understated thing. Like a lot of people don't talk enough about is grit. Like you need that to be successful at this. Cause there's a lot of times, like Charles and I were talking about, like you get rejected by stuff. Well, how do you respond to that? Do you keep going or do you stop, you know? And it must have been awesome to grow up in a house where your dad was an artist, you know, like a full-time artist. That's
we were poor. It wasn't all rainbows. I mean, my perspective of it wasn't always, I mean, what Seth was saying was true. I definitely believed that you could be an artist and stuff, but yeah, I mean, I definitely like, the last semester of art school was like, this has been awesome, but I got to go be in the real world now and pay bills. Like it's not just a class that I can make an A in. I got to find clients and pay bills or whatever. And again, my parents are very supportive and kind of talked me down off the ledge. But yeah, there have been times where I've been like, this is crazy.
Well, one of the things that made me incredibly happy just from a distance though, Mitch, was seeing your dad. We talk about a lot of our students that go through those phases of life where they get away from it, but he became an artist again. He was producing artwork, right? I mean, how I know, but for our audience, how much joy did that bring you to see him creating again and being an artist?
Yeah, man, that was awesome. It was crazy too, because he really hadn't done stuff in a long time. And then when I went to SCAD with you guys and I would come home on breaks, there would be like watercolors that were done. And I'm like, are you doing this again? Like, and he really got back into it. And then as he got older, he started doing like more like illustration stuff again. And he started doing like arts and crafts shows, and he just started, just doing all that. And it was really cool to see him jump back in. My parents, they moved from the Atlanta area back to South Florida and got really active in the community and the veteran community too. And he passed away recently, but I was just really happy to see like towards the end of his life, how involved he got in stuff again. So it was really cool. Like, I'm glad he did all the things that he was doing.
That's one of the things that we are incredibly passionate about. And Chad, I want to ask about your journey here in just 1 second, but we are incredibly passionate about that. It's never too late to get into art. It's never too late. Art is part of what I think are meant to be, whether you're starting out for the very first time later in life, or if you're a 25-year watercolorist that just needs a studio space to get involved. We want people, and I think Mitch, Charles, I think you guys would agree with what Chad and Thomas and I and everybody here, we promote. Art is for everyone. Art is for every single person. Whether you're just finger painting for fun, or if you're wanting to really dive into it and get involved, art is for everybody. And here at the Visual Arts Academy studio, or your local studio, or your local academy, please produce some kind of art. Be creative. Don't just consume content. Be a creator and get engaged in a community. Be a part of a group. Find some friends. Be motivated and get going. And you've heard some of these stories, but Chad, we've got another one. Yours is a little bit different than everybody else's, right? So you mind sharing a little? We've done some in the past, but we haven't dived in too much. What was your journey?
Yeah, so I'd always drawn and did art and creative stuff ever since I was like super young. And so, it was kind of a natural progression. As soon as I was in high school, the conversation was, where are you going to go to college? And my uncle is an artist, and I've had some other relatives that are artists, but, through talking with him and my mom and other relatives, we all decided, going to art school would be a good move for me. And so I applied at a lot of different places, got accepted, many schools, but Ontario College of Art and Design was right by my uncle's house. So it kind of worked out that it was a really good school, and I had a place to stay, and it was something I could afford. But looking back on it, I realize now as a 48-year-old that at that time, I was definitely not ready for it, like emotionally or mature or anything like that. Like, I'm not saying I wasted the time, because I definitely worked hard and did all the assignments and all of that. But when it comes to like life skills and just life in general outlook, like I was not ready for that. So after I was while I was at school, my dad passed away. And so I had a lot of like emotional stuff I was working through and all that kind of thing. So my natural progression after school wasn't to get an art job. Instead, I took a few years off just to kind of figure out life in general. And after that time, I really questioned, like, should I be an artist? Is this something that is that I'm good enough to do, something I should do with my life? And so I spent a lot of years just working a regular job. And so there's years where I would put art away for a while. I wouldn't really draw or anything, but it didn't take long for where I had to work on something else. So I would get a project out, I would work on a personal thing, a personal drawing, whatever. I would do, I worked on a comic book story for many, many years. Take it out, I would work on it for a little while, and then, you just have that voice in your head, like, well, you've got bills to pay, you've got responsibilities, like really buckle down on that, focus on life or whatever. So that's kind of what I would do, throughout my years. And I would work on freelance stuff, but really, really hated that. I really hated freelance. And I'd much rather just kind of draw or paint for myself. And I was really inspired by a lot of artists. One in particular I think of is Marcel Duchamp, who I discovered in college, who, yes, he was successful during his lifetime, but for the most part, held a regular job. Now, the advantage for him is he had very rich patrons who paid for his life, but at the same time, he worked as a librarian and did art on his own at his own pace, and that later really resonated with me. And I always worked a regular job and then did art for myself. And so and so recently, the last couple of years, I really embraced art as a gift that I've been given. That's something that I need to steward and use well. And so I really got serious in the last several years, working on art and all of that. And then the door opened for me to meet Seth and be a part of this and teach, which I've absolutely loved. And there have been a few times where I said to either my wife or friends, it's like, man, I should have been doing this 20 years ago. Like this, the ability to teach and then be able to work on art myself. And eventually I'd love to do art shows and plein air work and just get out and show my work a lot more. So I'm really excited about that, and I'm really excited about teaching. I really love doing that as well. So that's kind of the overview. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, so what I hear from all these different stories for a lot of our students that are watching, or any of you guys that are joining us, and by the way, thank you everybody. Avatar Angel, great to see you again. I think I apologize. St. Clarica, thank you for joining. All these individuals. Wow, we've got quite a few people watching, jumping in and joining. You can tell that from everybody's background, everybody's stories, there's no one path. There's no one way that you get to these professional levels, or the way that you're just being creative or doing a lot of different stuff. But again, we've talked about this. One of the things that brought all the three of us here together outside of Chad was the Savannah College of Art and Design. And we actually had a question that says, you guys are so impressive. Thank you, by the way. I think those gentlemen are incredibly impressive. How much was SCAD? Yeah, Mitch says thank you as well. You all are so impressive. How much was SCAD a part of your story and success? And holy crap, Mitch, I'll let you take this one, brother. I know you are ready to dive into this. How much was SCAD a part of our story and our success?
Well, the person that asked that question, you might want to get a drink and just sit back. So yeah, I would say the strongest relationships that I have in my life right now were made at that school, whether it was the friends that I have, the mentor that I had, or my wife, who I also met at SCAD. Right. It's that whole experience changed my entire life. I was a transfer student. I went to community college first, and I kind of fought the whole art school idea for as long as I could, because like a lot of other people, I was like, how am I supposed to make money as a painter? But this is the thing that I'm good at. And every time I tried something, it never made me happy the way that painting does. And I had that, like I said before, like that grit, that like desire in me, and I just couldn't give it up. I couldn't quit it. So I went to SCAD, and then there was that little bit of me too. I was older when I met you, Seth. Like I was 23, yep. I think. That's right. So when we started the lacrosse team, I was like one of the old men. There was like three of us that were older, and those relationships that we made during that time were life-changing also. That gave us a lot of direction as well, because so many people go to school and they party all the time and they mess around, and we couldn't do that. We had to be at practice early in the mornings all the time. And that really, that gave us like regiment. So it was really cool. I had a great time.
I want to piggyback off that real quick, because the other thing that was great was everybody that was on that team was there to be an artist, right?
Yeah.
Like we were there to be some of the best. And I think we won a lot of respect. And this is just my opinion. This is just Seth's opinion here. I think we gained a lot of respect from a lot of the students who thought we were just athletes that couldn't hack it in D1 or D2 and came to art school to play sports. And yet I think we were some of the top students in classes. And I think we proved to a lot of those students that, hey, yes, we are here because and excited to be able to be an athlete, but boy, we love art just as much as you, and we want to be exceptional artists. I think we won a lot of people over.
We did. How could we not? Because where our games were played was at the park in the middle of Savannah. So we had the best show that everybody could go to. And really, I think for me, one of the reasons that I wanted to play so bad was because I got tired of seeing all these like recruited athletes at our school that thought they were tough guys, like the baseball players and some of the basketball. And I was like, these guys aren't tough. Like, but we didn't have a football team and there was no wrestling team. So when I saw that opportunity and I saw the flyer in the gym that there was an interest meeting for lacrosse, I was like, yeah, I'm doing that. So it was awesome.
Charles, what about you, man? What do you think?
Yeah, I'm thinking what Mitch said. Like, let's get a drink and sit down and talk about this. I personally feel like SCAD was very valuable to me, and it was definitely like where I was supposed to go, and the people I met and the things I learned and stuff. I would say though that I don't think that, like we said about the way to be a professional artist or whatever, I think that people's paths can be unique. Like Chad, Chad's path was different than the three of us. And then even after art school, even though that was the same, our three paths were different. But I think that there are other ways to do it. And I think I think that private art school is a really expensive
endeavor
for like, I'm kind of want to try something out. I want to get my toes wet. I think you could go to a community college or somewhere else, and probably your professors I think that art school, you're going to have some really good professors there, but professors can only do so much. They can only carry you so far, and then you got to do the rest yourself. And so there's lots of artists who did it all by themselves. And now with like different ways that you can get information and education online and stuff, I'm not trying to say that people shouldn't go to art school, but I just think it's not the only path. It's not the only version. It's the version. It's the way I went, and I really think it was right for me. But the most I have learned about art has been as in a career doing it, like having to figure it out and being like, all right, I got to do this, and here's how I need to, figure it out on my own kind of. And so, I think it was valuable, but I think if some other people wanted to try a different way, that wouldn't necessarily be wrong.
Well, and I agree with that 1,000%. And I will tell you twofold. One, SCAD completely changed my life entirely. And I could again with you guys, we could sit down and talk all night. But I will share a quick story, because for me, it was the ultimate right decision. I would not be the man I am without having spent a number of years with you gentlemen and the other guys there, and Coach Cummings and the mentors and professors that we had, some better than others, right? Some really wonderful experiences and some not so good experiences, but that's life. But I will share a quick story. My first year of teaching, after having left SCAD, there was a young lady who was a senior in high school, Charles. She was one of the most exceptional painters I've ever seen in my life. I mean, she was brilliant. And we had a parent-teacher conference, and her parents were like, we think we're going to send her to art school in Denver. And I'm sitting there going, please send her to like business school or something, right? Like this young lady is going to teach those professors how to paint, right? Like she doesn't need to learn technique. She doesn't need to learn those kind of things. She's absolutely brilliant. And I encouraged her, I said, educate her in other elements of how to run a business or how to manage herself or how to self-promotion or something like that. She ended up going for 1 year and then dropped out because her path was different. She ended up going and selling directly in galleries at 19 years old. And I think I haven't followed up with her in many years, but I think she's still actively a professional artist showing in galleries. So I think there's so many different pathways. There's so many different things, and it's needed for everybody. I can tell you personally, for me, my life would not be what it is had I not been around you guys. I was on the younger side. I started SCAD when I was 17, and these guys were really beneficial in helping me learn how to navigate life, how to navigate expectations, how to be a better friend, a better athlete, a better artist. I was constantly motivated because of my teammates. I remember seeing projects that they worked on. I remember seeing paintings that Mitch was doing, or stuff that Charles was working on, or even just, some of the graphic design students that we had, the video and film guys like Craig Shaloyko. I mean, all these guys, right? I was just so blown away by what they were producing that I realized I didn't want to waste my time there, right, Charles? Because some students go to college and they kind of, or as Chad mentioned, he may not have been emotionally or mature to get everything out of university the way that he should have. I wasn't going to let that happen because, man, for me to be there was a gift. I had no right to attend that university, from a familial standpoint. I mean, it was a big leap of faith by my mother. And Mom, if you're watching this, I'll never be able to thank you enough for finding a way to send me there. And I wouldn't have gained, my best friend and who I consider a brother, Thomas, who is the co-founder of this academy. We go back to those. We actually met in Rising Star, which is a summer program for juniors in high school, and we were selected as random roommates. And I have a brother now that has been in my life longer than he's been out. And so I think everybody's story is different. And if you're one of our students here, if you're just watching, we have people, it looks like, from all over the place. We've got some over in Europe, it looks like. Guys, thanks for jumping in. Thanks for joining. We're so grateful you guys are here. We want to know your stories. Give us some feedback. Let us know what's going on. Give us some insights. Ask questions. We love it when you ask questions about processes, which I'm going to do right now. Or actually, Chad, if you want to do, we were talking beforehand very quickly. Charles, we have no idea what the heck that you're building right there. Like, what is that process? Because is it a piece of cardboard? What the heck is going on?
Sure. Yeah. This is an armature. So the clay I use is it's an oil-based clay. So I don't have to keep it wet. It's very convenient. You use like river clay and you got to like mush it and get all the air bubbles out. And then you got to spray it with your water bottle and keep it wet. And what I'm using is a plastiline. It's oil-based, and it's, let's see, close there. It's this little stuff, and I got a heater down here. I'm actually I'm working hard over here. I'm like sweating while we're doing this. But you mush it up, but it's not real strong, because it doesn't dry. So if you have a person with their arm out like this joint right here, just clay on clay, will not hold this arm up and it'll break off. So you got an interior armature. And so my turkey here, so this is going to be a big fat male turkey, and I don't have much of it, you can see, but you can see these like turkey legs going on. And then this big ball here, this is pink insulation foam, like that you buy at Home Depot, and spray foam. And I just cut it and carve it with a hot knife to make my shape, get as much bulk as I can. This back piece is just like some fiberboard, but that's going to be the big fan. He's like fanned out with those tail feathers. It's going to be bigger though. They'll probably come up about this high. And so then the first part, you just mush clay all over it, and it kind of looks like, the people at Pompeii or whatever is just like the version. And then you come back with all your tools, your carving tools, and you cut it out and start working on the details and really get the folds in the clothes or the feathers. And that's when the magic really happens. But so once that's all done, then I'll take this to a foundry in Atlanta and we'll make molds of it. I think I might have a mold.
It's such a cool process. So if you're listening, while he's trying to find that, so essentially what he's doing is he's building a support structure. He's building a support structure to cover the majority of the mass. And then he's putting the clay, the oil-based clay on top to get his form, his details, and to really kind of finalize the sculpture. But because it's not as sturdy as a wet clay, he's built out this armature and this structure to give it that support, so that way he can work any way that he wants. And the great thing about oil-based clays is you can come back to it whenever. It never dries out. So you can kind of keep working it as you have time. But he's going to show us this. The foundry, I think, is amazing. I think the foundry process is one of the coolest in the world.
Yeah. So when this is done, when it's, you know, as pretty as this this turkey in the back here, let me do all my moving here. You know, once it has all the details like this turkey here, then you'll take it to the foundry, and the first thing you're gonna do is cover it in rubber, and you get this mold like this, and it's got all the details in there. And then on top of the rubber, they do a ceramic like that, and then it's got seams in it, and you pop it open. And I take the clay back, and then, like, again, it doesn't dry, so I just chop it up into little pieces and make the next sculpture out of it. And this stuff has been around for probably 10 years. It's probably been 25 sculptures at this point.
That's awesome.
Which is sweet. Saves me a bunch of money. And so then you got that hollow shell that they made. And there are lots of steps. I'll spare all the details, but back and forth multiple times, but ultimately you're going to take that hollow shell and pour molten bronze into it, and then you have a bronze version of what you had originally had in clay, and then you pop it open one final time, and you've got your metal sculpture.
It's such an amazing process. We're hoping to expand into a clay-based lessons. Charles, and this has really inspired me to really want to push that even further. I don't think we'll be a wet studio because we're not quite piped for a wet studio or built for it, but I love what you're doing, and it's motivating me, guys. So I know we've had a few students ask if we're going to get into sculpture. Bear with us. We're on month 5 of operations, and we're going to continue to grow, and we're going to bring some sculptures to you. We do have a question for Mitch. Mitch, can you share your favorite technique in your specific field of oil painting? I guess I'm going to try to rephrase that. Can you share with us the technique that you use or that you enjoy painting in the most?
No. The short answer as to why it's no is because my work is a combination of a bunch of styles. So I don't really have a favorite one. I do a bunch. So I try to figure out a way to do a little bit of each in every painting that I have. That's kind of that's the direction I've been going on now for years. I never liked, like, when I look at somebody's Instagram feed and their work is just like one style repeated times over and over and over again. It's like, cool. That's not everybody thinks like that.
I agree. I get this question a lot. I don't know if that whatever I apologize. It doesn't look like a raw sienna, but what is that underpainting? Because I get asked all the time. I use yellow ochre. Yellow ochre is kind of my wash. But what is that? And we get asked all the time, and I want to hear your take on it. Why do you do that? What's the point? We get this all the time. Why do you cover it in yellow? Or why do you cover it in that? Can you explain why you enjoy doing that, or what the purpose is of why you work that way?
Yeah, sure. So because we paint in layers, since it's oil, that first wash, like you're talking about, influences all the color that goes over the top of it. So, depending on what your goal is, for me, this body of work, like I said, it was inspired by Special Force friends and firefighters. I'm trying to tell their deployment stories and humanize their experiences. But one of the influences with all of this is like the thought of like the American flag. So with these paintings, my underpainting color is Venetian red. So I'm using that as the underpainting color for these. Because I want them to have like this like warmer glow to them, even when I use cooler colors, that'll still impact that color that goes over the top.
Well, and one of the things I think I love about all of your work, and if you guys haven't seen it, you got to go check out his Instagram. You will see so many diversified pieces. You're not going to see what he talked about that he says he doesn't like. You're not going to see repetitive work, the same stuff over and over. You're going to see a beautiful collection of amazing artwork. But one of the things that I always think is absolutely brilliant about your work, Mitch, is those underpaintings and the color choices you have. And I didn't realize it was that specific red, but it's brilliant. Is it provides color unification, right? It unifies your color palette in a way that it's transparent. In oils, that transparency shines through, like Mitch is talking about, guys. but it also allows for colors to resonate better with each other. So as he works and he does these large paintings, when you're seeing the top right of a painting or the bottom left of a painting, that unification really comes across, I think, Mitch. And that's one of the things I've really enjoyed about your work over the last 7 or 8 years, 9 years or so of that kind of series, is they fit and they feel really collectively whole, if that makes sense.
I hope so.
Yeah, I mean, well, you've done a hell of a job with it, buddy. I tell you, it's amazing. And what's funny is, Chad, you primarily work in graphite, right? And I don't know if you can swing around, Chad, if you can swing around and show that portrait of your wife. This is like 6 feet by 6 feet by 4 feet or something like that. But you have a similar thought process of unifying your drawing, right? Like, so, can you talk about that? I mean, yeah, this is a huge rendering and it's absolutely spectacular, but talk a little bit about how you unify your drawing. Charles is unifying it with form and texture. Mitch is doing it with color and chiaroscuro. But what do you do that unifies something that doesn't have color? How do you do that when you're only working in grayscale?
So that's a great question. And honestly, caught me off a little hard because I'm thinking, how do I do that? I haven't really. So I think the thing that unifies all that I do is more kind of the subject matter, and we've talked about that before. I'm trying to create things that kind of my little byline is that I create art that moves people to contemplate God. And so I have a theology and philosophy behind the work that I do. And so that's kind of what unifies. So as far as technique goes, I'm typically up till probably about last year, most of my drawing would be very clean and very precise, much like the portrait that you just saw. And then in this past year, I've really gotten into charcoal, which, especially with vine charcoal, has really loosened my style up a bit, especially with figure drawing. And I've been doing some plein air landscape when it was a bit warmer. And I absolutely love vine charcoal and charcoal just in general because of it helps me draw almost like as if I were a painter. Like it just loosens you up. It forces you to not think so precisely. You're trying to get precise subject matter in an imprecise way, almost impressionistic. And there's something about that I just absolutely love. The thing about working very precise and clean is it can be painstaking. Sometimes it can kind of freeze you up as far as really experimenting. Whereas, when you're using charcoal, you're just kind of very experimental, flowing, just putting charcoal everywhere and then just tightening it up as it goes. And so I really love that. So as far as more unity of subject matter, whereas technique, I like to try different things. So I've been in charcoal, I've been started using some pastel as well. And so I don't know if that answers the question, but that's just kind of my approach.
That's great. Well, I'm glad you guys are talking, because while you guys have been talking, I've been messing my painting up. So I've got to try to pull some of this pigment off here, and I'm so glad nobody can really see it, because boy, if you think I'm able to instruct you guys, you just saw me mess up big time. But that's part of it. Part of it, we talk about the artistic and the creative journey. Mitch and Charles talked a little bit about like the rejections of having a public work not selected, but sometimes your work just isn't going the way you want it to, and that's okay. You got to work through those things. Mitch just talked about perseverance. Perseverance is a huge thing of being a professional artist. Charles has talked about it as well. Chad and I talk about it pretty regularly, but it's a huge thing to keep persevering through the mistakes, keep persevering through all those different elements. And I really want to talk about one of the biggest, we joke about some of our experiences in our life and our stories. There was a moment in college that absolutely changed, and I've shared this story with every lacrosse team. I've been a coach of multiple sports. There's one specific story that I will never forget for the rest of my life. And I don't remember the specific of the game or where we were at. You guys might, but we were at a game. We had a doubleheader weekend. We had back-to-back games, and it was coming up on the last 7 or 8 minutes of the game. And I took a shot off my thumb. And at the time, they didn't really make really good goalie gloves. My hands were small, so the goalie gloves didn't really fit. And Mitch slowly turns, and I took a shot off my thumb. It ripped my thumbnail up and broke my thumb or fractured my thumb. And if you remember, I took my glove off. I don't know if you guys remember, but my thumb was like dripping with blood. It was like it did not feel well. And at the time, we didn't have a backup goalie. And I remember Mitch, I think it was Mitch, Charles, and Joe Madron. I think those were my three boys, and those were my long pole defenders. They were the guys that stood in front of me and made sure I didn't get beat up all the time. And they literally pulled me aside and they said, "Don't come off the field. You won't have a shot on you for like the next 6 or 7 minutes." And it was one of the coolest moments of my life. And I just got chills because I remember that feeling of trust. And I've struggled with trust in my life. But in that moment, I completely trusted those guys to the fullest extent. And for 6.5 minutes, which is a really long time, especially I think we were playing a pretty good team, I think, guys. I think we may have lost that game. But they didn't put a shot on goal. And it just – I share this story all the time because it was so comforting to know in that moment that and I wish we have Joe on here at some point. Maybe we'll get him on here. It was so comforting to know that these guys had your back. They had your support. They were there with you. And even now, 20 years later, they've got my back. They've got my support. They've joined this live session to support this endeavor of our academy. And you don't get relationships like that very often in life. And I'm just so incredibly grateful, and I'm so thankful. And not only that, the very next day, my thumb was huge. I don't even think I could fit it in my glove. Charles, who is a multifaceted athlete, goes, "I'll jump in cage so Seth doesn't have to." And I think that's the only game I missed in college was that game. And Charles jumped in, and for those of you that don't know much about lacrosse, being a goalie is not always the most fun. He had over 20 saves in that game, guys, and he jumped in, and it was just a spectacular experience in 48 hours to have their trust, their support, their love, their encouragement. And now 20 some odd years later, they're doing the same daggone thing for this Visual Arts Academy and studio that Thomas and I have started. And gentlemen, I can never thank you enough, but those are the kind of stories that I think you can translate into art, right? Those moments, those passions, that energy. And when you can share those stories, I hope it encourages a lot of you. I hope a lot of you are getting excited by sharing these informational pieces. But guys, I wanted to open up to you guys. We've gone for about an hour. We've got another hour of drawing time. I get emotional. I get sappy, so I got to cut that off because I don't want to scare anybody away. Mitch is laughing. He knows all about it all too well. But let's open it up, guys. Ask questions. Let us know you're here. If you like what you're seeing, give us a like, subscribe, a share. Let your friends know about us. If you're local, make sure you come by and see the Visual Arts Academy studio here in historic Middletown. If you're down there in Greenville, South Carolina, make sure you go and visit the Pate Gallery. If you're up in New York, swing by Mitch and make sure you see him because he loves communication. He loves stories. And obviously, you can come by and see Chad here as well. He's got his studio space on the second floor, and he's completely renovated it. There's like 50 beautiful works of art up there. But, guys, the live stream is a great way if you're international or not local in one of our areas. You get to be involved with us. You get to paint and draw with us, and we're so glad all of you are here. This is absolutely amazing. We're so grateful that everybody's joining us. But, gentlemen, open it up. What do you guys got?
I've got a question. I would love for each of you to share, on average, how long does it take you to complete an artwork? Now, I know that's kind of an open question because some pieces are bigger than others or more complex, but just as a general ballpark, how long does it take from the very first thought to the very last paint brush or paint stroke or whatever?
You want it first, Chuck? Go ahead.
I think mine's the weirdest, but I mean, for paintings, I'd say I try and have paintings to a client maybe in a month after talking about it, and then sculpture is going to be a lot longer. A life-size person is probably an 8-month process.
Yeah.
Probably like 5 months on my end and then 3 months at the foundry. So I'm only working on it for, 4 or 5 months. But then, from our final handshake to delivery date is probably an 8-month.
Wow.
So do you have, I would assume you would have several projects going on at the same time since
and that's go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. I was going to say, if you're making your living off this, if it takes 8 months just to do one thing, I mean, this might be kind of an ignorant question, or maybe too personal, but you're just getting a paycheck for that one thing. So like you still have bills coming in. So how do you kind of make money in between projects?
Well, I do juggle things, and that's a really good, a beneficial thing for my brain. It's the painting and sculpting seems in my head, between my ears, seems very different to me, and can kind of give me some freedom to, if I'm bored with a project or something, to force myself into a few hours of one, and then I can go upstairs and switch gears completely and do something different. But I'm still working. I'm still using my time wisely. I'm not just watching TV or whatever. Yeah. But for the sculpture, especially for the big projects, yeah, I mean, what I usually do is I bill my clients in quarters. So they pay me a quarter to start, and then another piece installment when the clay is done, and then another installment, because I'm also having to write big checks to the foundry and things like that. So that's usually how that works. But it actually is easier. That is the easier thing to budget, because even though I get a big check up front, I know I know how long that has to last me. That's easier to me than the catch and kill of 100 small paintings. I got some money, and now I finished that painting, and I need to find another painting. I need to immediately find another job because we have bills coming again in 4 weeks or whatever. So it's a little bit easier to have the big jobs, but yeah, I mean, I think over time that was a learning experience, being out of college and being like, how do I even do this? You get a big check and you're like, I'm 22 and I'm like, I'm rich. And then, poor.
I got paid.
So you immediately go back to being poor again, and you have to figure out how to do that. So,
yeah,
we actually, I know we've got the time question, but I want to address one of the questions that came through on Instagram. They said, thank you all so much for sharing your work in progress. I know many artists are not so open with sharing works before they're complete. How is this for each of you, sharing your work live while you're working on it? I'll go first.
I'm used to sharing stuff in progress with Instagram. So for me, yeah, I mean, I like doing this the same way that I like sharing how I do my work. So it's not
I'm kind of with Mitch on this. I actually, as an artist, I love seeing other artists' processes. So like, that's one of the things that I enjoy most. Like, don't get me wrong, I love seeing when your pieces are finished, Mitch, right? Like I love seeing it when it's completed, but I actually like seeing the journey. I like seeing where you come up with the concept, or like, the piece with the battle cross, right? The gear, the kit. And I like seeing it go from concept to reality to completion. And same thing like with this sculpture that you're watching here. I know, it takes a different time frame to see major changes in a sculpture, right, Chuck? Or even with Chad's drawing, I like the process. And I like it when other artists are open and willing to share that process. Not only is it learning, it's motivating for me. It's encouraging for me. It gets me excited. And so I'm right in line with Mitch on this one. I actually like it. I enjoy it. I think it's a lot of fun. But Charles, Chad, what do you guys think? Do you enjoy sharing that process?
Go ahead, Chad.
Go ahead. I was going to say, well, at first it was like pretty terrifying, because, you sit there and think you have that, it's a pretty common fear. You put yourself out there as kind of vulnerable, especially if, you mess up a piece, or, especially us doing these lives, if you're sitting there drawing or painting and you make a huge mistake, you feel a little bit foolish. But after a while, you get used to that and you kind of ignore it and realize, like, everyone makes mistakes. You're going to mess up. It's not a big deal. It is at first. And then after a while, you kind of actually enjoy it. And I agree with you guys that, I love seeing, artist sketchbooks, artist process videos, behind the scenes stuff, like how they're thinking through a project and all the various steps. I mean, obviously the final project is amazing, but getting there is just as amazing in my mind, because that's, like you said, Seth, it inspires me to work even harder and try new things and things like that. But yeah, I enjoy posting, and really on the business side of things, it's natural promotion. You're putting yourself out there. It gives you a voice in between major projects, because like you guys, it takes me months and months and months to finish a drawing. And so if I just posted when they were done, I mean, it'd be like 6, 7, 8 months between posts, which you can't do that. So, I mean, you can, but as far as promoting yourself. So yeah, so that's how I feel. What about you, Charles?
Well, I feel like I don't like it. I mean, painting, I don't mind, but with the sculpture, I feel like it just looks it doesn't look like anything until it's 95% done. I feel like I never let my clients see it until it's done, because they will be upset
in the process.
The eyes aren't right, and you're like, well, I haven't done the eyes yet. It's not there yet. And I also am sometimes poor about putting things on Instagram for that same reason. I'm like, it's taking me forever to work on this, and I don't really have any updates, and I don't feel like the progress looks really beautiful. So I don't know that. I mean, as long as I've been doing this, I don't know that I've grown out of that like self-conscious feeling about looking at a halfway complete piece of art. So,
well, I will say, I do want to chime in on this, because I think Charles brings up a good point. I did not realize that so much of the social media aspect and sharing of it would be so heavily involved in the marketing side of it, right? Like it's time consuming. It takes a lot of energy to remember to set up the camera, to get this post, to get that there. You see artists post all the time. They're like, I didn't realize being a full-time artist would be 90% this and that. And I think you can let it get out of control. I do think that for our academy and for the studio, and I've had many of our young artists, and I mean, when I say young, I mean, mid-20s and younger, come and say that it's been incredibly helpful, that it's been incredibly encouraging, because when they're at home on their own and they're kind of working in isolation, Thomas, our co-founder, has a great saying. He's like, you don't have to work in a silo. You don't have to be an artist that's just completely isolated. If you want to be, that's okay. That's fine, right? If you just want to be locked away, working on your own, doing your own thing, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, but you don't have to. You can collaborate, you can communicate, you can be inspired. Mitch, you're in one of the world's biggest hubs for creativity, for gosh sake. You know what I mean? Like, you are surrounded by people with aspiring dreams and motivations and encouragement and excitement. Your wife is a phenomenal fashion designer. I mean, I can't even imagine sharing a studio space with her, being motivated by everything that she does. I mean, I just think that's absolutely spectacular. My work has dramatically changed sharing a studio space with you, Chad. Right? I mean, we know that. Charles, you're in a family-owned and run gallery and studio space. That's got to be inspiring. So I think the social side can be very time-consuming and very structured and very tough. But I think there's a lot of value for young artists in feeling like they're part of a community. And I think that's really, really valuable.
I was going to say that. Yeah, I'll echo that. I mean, earlier when we were talking about the sports, like the lacrosse team and stuff, and I think all that is super valuable, but you might have some students who aren't into sports or whatever, and I'm like, that's fine, but all of those lessons of having like a supportive community, I think that's still, you got to find it somewhere. Maybe it's on a lacrosse team, maybe it's not, but you got to find people who will push you and will ask more of you as far as your strengths, and really like stretch your comfort level, and will support you. And if you have people who are tearing you down and making it harder for you to be an artist, I would say find new people.
Absolutely. Oh man, boys, I believe, and he better let us know if this is him, I think Joe Madron is on. I think Joe is watching. Joe, if that's you, brother, you got to let us know you're here, because I want to share a quick story with you guys. You talk about what Charles just said, what Charles talked about, those people encouraging, motivating you. Here's something that is interesting. I would not have played lacrosse if it wasn't for Joe. Joe had this beautiful car. He said, yes, sir, it's him. That's my boy. He's on. He had this beautiful car. He was this cool, tall, dark, handsome dude that had this lacrosse stick. I thought he was something out of a movie, like the American Pie movie. And I did not have a way to get to and from practices. And again, I had no idea what lacrosse was. I was kind of like Mitch. I was a different sport athlete. And I remember he gave me a ride home from an interest meeting. And he goes, something along the lines, Joe, I may not have it exactly right, but he's like, so what do you think? You going to play? You going to join? And I remember going, I don't have a car. I don't have a way of getting there. I was living in there. He goes, I will pick you up and drive you every day if that's what it takes. And I remember going, holy crap. So Charles, just like you talked about, having that support group that's going to push you and encourage you, none of that would have happened if I did. And I remember I went back to my dorm room. Thomas was my teammate at the time. And he goes, how did it go? And I said, I actually really like these guys. These guys are really, really cool. And he goes, awesome. You got to keep doing it because you're driving me crazy. You got to get out of this dorm. You're driving me nuts. If you don't go and do something physical, you and I are just going to butt heads. And so you have to have those people that encourage you and motivate you to do it. Joe, thanks for jumping on, brother. We got to get you on sometime. But guys, I'm going to give us a little bit of a break here. Just a reminder. Thank you guys for jumping on. Thanks for joining the Visual Arts Academy and Studio here out of Middletown, historic Middletown, Louisville, Kentucky. We've got Charles Pate Jr. out of Greenville, South Carolina, award-winning sculptor, painter, writer, comic. He does it all, guys. It's funny because I always think of him very much like a Michelangelo. He's a phenomenal painter who didn't consider himself a painter. He was a sculptor, right? He thought he was a sculptor. It's amazing that you have so many multifaceted individuals. We've got Mitchel Coffman out of New York here working on a beautiful painting in the background, an oil painting that is just absolutely spectacular, also award-winning, nationally renowned. And then we've got Chad Nuss up here, our master draftsman and instructor out of the Visual Arts Academy. And it's just amazing to have so many people on. Joe says, absolutely love you guys. Joe, it's amazing. We were talking about how 20 years later, we still have each other's support, and I'm so grateful for it, guys. This has been amazing. So let's jump back, though, because I don't think you answered the question. How long does it take for an average piece? What's it kind of run you? And I know that's, Chad already said that's kind of a loaded question, right? But what does it kind of work? What does your work process kind of go like?
It depends on what the piece is. I've done commercial work before. I've painted commercial murals for advertising companies, and sometimes those had to be done in like 4 days. And there'd be a team of us working on it. We're talking about a wall that's like 60 feet tall. Where I've also done like the portraits for the military base. Each one of those I spent about a little bit over a week on. And then paintings like the one I'm working on now, this will take about 6 months.
Holy moly.
Yeah, it just depends. With what I'm doing right now, there's so many different styles and approaches that I use to do this work. This is where sharing the processes on social media come in handy also, because when you do that, you can see work evolve, and then you can also kind of tell like what needs work or what you don't like or what you really do like. And I feel like that really helps you complete the work. Because, to the point you guys were about the community thing, I'm very reclusive. My wife has to remind me to go outside. I basically leave my apartment to go to the gym or to go grocery shopping. So it's really helpful to step back and look at what I've been doing all day through a time lapse to see if I'm achieving what I said. So
That's cool.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I have a follow-up question with that. A lot of our students will talk about drawing through the week, and they'll ask, we've had questions on here, what's the minimum you should draw a day or whatever. So for both of you, especially since you're professional, how much time do you spend a day actually working on projects for drawing or painting or creating?
Oh man, if I'm painting, this is also why I don't have a studio that is outside of my home. I'm by my work all the time. So when I get painting, it'll be somewhere, I would say, between 10 to 12 hours a day.
Wow.
With a break. I usually take a break to go work out because I'm a meathead at heart. Now I'm just an old man, but I still do it. Got to stay active.
Well, I think, I'll chime on this because mine has dramatically changed.
Yeah, you have a ton of other responsibilities.
Yeah, man.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a completely different experience in the extent, though, that before we opened the academy, I was in marketing and advertising, and I would travel a lot. And so I would do a lot of drawings on planes, right, Charles? Like I'd be on a plane, I'd take my sketchbook, and I would do these drawings. And then I'd get home, and luckily my wife is incredibly supportive, and she knows that, I need to create. But I would do a painting. I would finish a painting maybe once every 2 months, every 3 months, just kind of on my downtime, kind of going through it. And what's amazing now, though, is I'm constantly surrounded by these students, both teenagers, young artists, and adults, that I am more encouraged now to create work than I have been in many, many years. The challenge, though, is I have all these other responsibilities of running the academy, right?
Oh,
and so I'm sitting here.
Grown up.
Yeah, I'm a full blown grown up, right? You're running this academy and you're trying to do the best you can with it in this first 5 months. But it's moments like this that I realize the time it takes me to complete doesn't matter anymore, right? Like, because I'm running the academy, I'm not. This isn't my income is completing works, right, Mitch? Right, Charles? Like, that's not it anymore. It's changed. I used to do shows and exhibitions, and I would have sales, and I would make income from artwork. But it's a different experience now having the academy. I don't know, Chad, if I'm working faster or if it just feels faster. Does that make sense? Like, because of the energy that I'm constantly surrounded by, I'm so motivated and encouraged that it feels like I'm painting more and I'm completing works faster, or if it just feels that way because of the energy, or if I actually am.
Yeah, I feel the same way, especially coming in every day, talking to students. And I feel, and Seth, you and I have talked about this, you feel it's not really a pressure, but you feel a responsibility as a teacher to be producing yourself, because you want your students to see what you're doing, and you want to lead by example. And so that's one of the great things that I love about this place, is that we have a place that we can come and create, and our students can come in, see what we're working on, and that kind of thing. I feel the same way as you in the sense that I've never created as much artwork as I am right now. Partly because it's my job to teach, but also just constantly thinking about projects, thinking about things, ways to use my art in the classroom, or new techniques that I want to try. And honestly, part of the reason why I got into charcoal, and this is not the only reason, but part of it was just thinking about my students. Like, when I teach a drawing 101 class, I better know what I'm doing when it comes to charcoal. So I started working on it a little bit, and come to find out, I really, really loved it. And so I feel the same with you as far as that. So
we've got a couple comments here, guys. I'm going to throw them out here for you. First and foremost, we've got a special comment. Just remember to not leave your sketchbook in the microwave at a hotel on a lacrosse away game. That's from Joe Madrid. Throwing back out some of the good old questions from back in the day. What a phenomenal experience. What a phenomenal memory. I'm not going to elaborate on that one because we do, but Joe, thank you. We do have another fantastic question here, and I'm going to throw this one out. It says, it seems that all of you very much enjoy what you do. Do you find it more or less difficult to achieve a work-life balance in this case? Do you find it more or less difficult to achieve a work-life balance in this case?
I'll say something about that because so here at my studio, my dad and I share the studio space, and every once in a while I have a fair amount of, or not a ton, but like once in a while I have some young artists that come and share some space here, and I kind of try and treat that as a something I can kind of give back to the community. And I usually let them do it for a couple months for free, and then after that, like, charge them a little tiny bit of rent, but mostly just trying to like let them feel what it's like to be an artist without having the pressure of having to pay a big rent or whatever. And we talk about that with them, that some of the guys love it, some of the guys and girls, once it becomes a job, it stops being fun to them, and they have to manage that. And that's another thing I would say for everyone that sees this, to survey themselves and kind of feel like what is their version of it, what's their vision of being an artist that they would like to be. And for some people, I don't want it to be about making money. I just love doing it, and I feel very lucky and very blessed to have a job that I love doing. But as I said at the beginning, it's not always rainbows and butterflies. I mean, there are lots of times where it's a grind and you have to just do it anyway. And if I just came to the studio and did things I was motivated in, I would be homeless. So I have to. Fortunately, again, it's in an avenue, you know, a vein of interest that overlaps greatly. So I love doing my job. It's so much better than if I personally were at a desk all day and trying to find some time to do a painting here and there. But it is still a job, and there are still lots of times where, you know, you're asking how many hours a day am I drawing or painting or whatever. There's still lots of times where the kids need something, and the studio has a leak in the roof, and I also have like invoices I have to mail and emails I have to respond to, and I have to force myself, like, set a timer and be like, it does not matter. You have to paint for 2.5 hours before you can do any more emails or whatever. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's a good question. I would say it's definitely something you have to work at. If you're used to drawing or painting, and just because you love it and it's fun, that's awesome. And then when you turn it into a job, it's going to be awesome some, and it's going to be a job some. And so, yeah, I think that's my 2 cents about that.
You ain't never lied.
I would just add a little bit to that, in the sense, like, I was on the other end where I've done some things, like I said before, I absolutely hated it. And so to your point, Charles, that's one of those things where I was like, you know what, I'd much rather work a regular job. And so then I have the freedom to create however I want, and I don't have to worry about someone telling me what to do. And that's the part, you know, for those students who are thinking about art and they're wrestling with that question, you're absolutely right. Like, for a lot of people, especially students that come in here, their first response is, well, I love to draw. It's a lot of fun. Or they'll get in the class and be like, yeah, I'm just here because I love to draw. And then as soon as they have to, like, do an assignment they don't want to do, then all of a sudden it's like, oh man, this is really hard, blah, blah, blah. You know, it's like you have to learn how to draw even when you don't want to. But if that's not for you, then you have to find a different way. And so for some artists, you know, they work a regular job and they do their art on the side, or, you know, in their free time or whatever. And there's nothing wrong with that either.
Yeah. If you just paint something every once in a while to put in your own living room, like, that's great. Like, you don't have to have a gallery. There's no problem. Seth earlier said that everyone needs to do art, and I completely agree. Everyone does not need to be a professional artist.
100%.
No, everyone.
100%.
Yeah, find an avenue to have a creative outlet, and it'll keep you sane and probably more mentally healthy. But you don't have to be a professional artist. You might prefer to have art as this special thing that I protect from the grind of my job, and I just do fun things. So,
well, and Charles, that's what it is for a lot of our participants. A lot of our participants hustle in here after work, and they've told us, Chad, I mean, you've heard it too. They sit here and they go, this is my downtime. This is my decompression. This is my relaxation. It's huge. We have a lot of seniors that come in and work here, Charles, for that cognitive, brain development and the continuation, because it helps with those aging brains. And everybody says it's senior moments. It's not senior moments. The brain is still incredibly active and creative. But I agree with you. I think art is for everyone, but not everybody needs to be a professional artist. It's a unique life. And even running the academy is a little bit different. But what else? Any work-life balance comments? We've got some other questions that have popped up, but I want to stay on that one if anybody wants to address it. Guys, we only have about 30 minutes left. This hour and a half already has flown by. It has absolutely flown by. If you're watching and you've been waiting to ask a question, you better get in it now, because as you can tell, this has been a phenomenal experience. We've got about 30 minutes left for the live stream, so get your questions out now. But any last comments? Mitch, Chad, you guys want to dive in any more on the work-life balance question?
Oh, man. Yeah,
I think
one thing with a senior, a lot of time, we spend by ourselves. This is really therapeutic for everybody that does this. I'm sure that Charles, like you or Seth or Chad, like you guys have been able to think about things that you've dwelled on for years, right? Like when you have all this time by yourself to work, you can really work through a lot of problems, and art really helps with that stuff. I know it does for me. I don't want to speak for everybody else, but
I think you hit the nail on the head. For me, it's incredibly therapeutic. Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely, it is.
But
All right,
I also have like maybe like I'm not going to say unhealthy, but a lot of time that I commit to this. So I mean, along the way, it took a long time to get to this point. There was a lot of I feel like a lot of artists don't talk enough about this. Like early on, like if you want it bad enough, there's a lot of things that you're willing to do to get to this point. There's a lot of stupid jobs that I've had that I try to, I do my best to be respectful of other people because this is their career. But for me, it's a job sort of mentality, and having the bigger goal in mind has always been a thing for me. So just kind of like piggybacking on what Charles was talking about before about the work-life stuff, figuring out, your practice.
Absolutely. All right, we've got another question here. So this question is being thrown out to our sculptor. So when you're working on this giant of a turkey, do you ever get hungry?
Yeah, not from the turkey, but yeah, I'm always hungry when I'm here at work.
I love that question. Great one. But no, in all seriousness, they were asking, since you're using an oil-based clay, does it change the way that you work it? Do you have to think about your medium differently?
Yes, it's different. Well, I'm wearing gloves. It's not toxic, but it's really sticky and hard to wash off. You can't use just like water and soap because it beads up on your hands. It's really just annoying. It's not bad. It's just annoying. But yeah, it moves differently than river clay. I do a lot of modeling first. I'm mushing on the clay, and then I do a lot of carving back off. So it's a back and forth. And I've done some river clay work, and I feel like it's a lot more like you move it with your hands. Like if you see people do pottery and stuff, you do figurative sculpture the same way, and you move, you stretch it out and make an arm here or there. And this, I feel like I have to build it and then use my scraping tools to carve it back down. So it is definitely different. But yeah, there are some things I really like better about the river clay, but the convenience of having this not dry outweighs anything that I liked better about river clay.
Well, one of the things that I think is interesting is you were trained as a painter, right? Like, I mean, you were formally, quote unquote, formally trained as a painter. Mm-hmm. But what is it that really drew you to sculpture? What was it that really motivated you to say, you know what, I love paint? And you do beautiful portrait works, guys. Check out his social media. Check out his gallery. Make sure to see all the vastness of his work. But what is it that draws you to sculpture, Charles, that you enjoy working in it so much?
I went to art school as a painting student. I didn't study any sculpture at SCAD. But my strength in painting was, I think, from drawing. Drawing was my first love. I grew up as a kid drawing everything, comic books and stuff. Loved to draw. And I actually think sculpture is closer to drawing than painting is to drawing, even though they seem very similar, and you're holding a pencil or you're holding a paintbrush, and you've got your flat 2D canvas or paper or whatever. I actually think that sculpture is a lot more like drawing, and I feel like painting is a very I don't know, it's a little bit more of an abstract art, and so it just came really naturally to me. And I worked on a job right out of school with my dad, a job he had won, and he asked me to help him a little bit with it, and I needed some money, so I was like, yeah, whatever. I think back then it was just to mush up clay or something. It wasn't necessarily to sculpt anything, but I ended up doing it and having some success, and he and I both were a little bit surprised, and yeah.
I think it's awesome. I say
a Veterans Monument, Mitch. You and I both have had our fun, doing those projects.
I remember that piece. It was brilliant. I equate sculpture to hyper drawing, Charles. Like it's just drawing in 3-dimensional. It's drawing in 3 dimensions, and I coach that up with my students. We've got a question though for Mitch. Mitch, I'm going to throw it your way. Mitch, how do you make the decision on what to paint next? Painting takes hundreds of hours. How do you decide on the final subject, especially because it will consume so much of your time?
I'm very, very selective with who I work with, because all of my work is narrative, just like you guys. I choose my subject matter way ahead of time. I learn everything that I can about the people that I'm working and making work about, because I have to care about what I'm doing before I can start. Because I feel like that always shows in the product. So, yeah, I mean, it's just that like I said, I pick like the narratives that I want to tell, then I meet the people, then I paint about them and their stories. That's how my practice works.
It's so amazing to me, because all four of us on here, and Charles, you're the same way too, even in your your little personal adventures, I guess you could call them, like your comic story and your children's books and the things that you say keep you creative.
Yeah.
I think, at least for the four of us, we're all just storytellers, right, Mitch? I mean, we're just telling stories, whether it's through, a script that Mitch has written, or it's through one of his paintings or his sculptures, whether it's through Chad's graphic novels that he's produced, which, by the way, guys, if you haven't seen his graphic novels, make sure you pick one up. They're absolutely spectacular. You need to read them. Or if you've seen, Charles's sculptures or paintings, and I know some of the work, Charles, isn't as narrative driven, right? It's, hey, they need this, and I'm going to provide this solution for them. But I think we all are storytellers in some fashion, right? It's either
I prefer the ones that are. I mean, those are better projects.
Oh, yeah. Well, like the one that you showed us, if you missed out the beginning of this live stream, guys, you need to go back to the beginning, watch it when it gets posted afterwards, and look at the maquette that he submitted. That's a brilliant story, right? Not only from the reliefs on the podium, Charles, but from the two figures themselves, right? The two figures and the narrative that is driven there. I think all of us were, our noses were in our screens taking a look at what you were showing us, because not only was the sculpture really great, it was the way that you were telling the story, right? And I think that, Mitch, I personally believe this. The works that you do are so narrative driven that sometimes, to me, they're almost emotionally overwhelming. Now, some of that's because of the subject matter, right? Yeah. Some of that's because of, but would you agree with that? That you're capturing so much story and narrative in a single image.
Yeah.
That it's so powerful.
It comes down to that, like I was saying, like learning about people and their stories. Like I form a bond with those people, you have to do that. Like I can't stress that enough when you're doing narrative work anyway. I don't, because if you're not, then in my opinion, this is me talking, like you're making decorative work, which is fine if you want to make decorative work. Right. Great. I mean, there's a place for everything, but this is also a huge undertaking. Like someone is trusting you with their life, with their story, and they're trusting you to capture that. And I put a lot of stress on myself, a lot of pressure to get everything right, to get all the details right. I am meticulous. And that was how, we all had the same painting teacher, and his entire life was that. He was committed 100% to art. He lived that romantic life that an artist, like in the history books, lived. His whole house was his studio. We all spent time there, and it's kind of on us to carry on those legacies and those stories as well. And that's some of the things that he passed on. So
that's one of the greatest honors I have. And everybody knows that, Charles, you studied in the painting department. Mitch, you were in the painting department. I did illustration and sequential. Alvarez was incredibly mad at me that I didn't study painting, didn't talk to me for like a week. But I think you're right. There is a legacy there that we're all very honored to carry on, right? And everybody had a different relationship with him. But all of my students, Chad, I think you can back me on this. Every single student that comes in here knows of the great master painter Jorge Alvarez. Not only for his great works of art, but because of the influence that he had on me and many, many, many other students. It wasn't just us. It was many, many, many students. But Mitch, you had an unbelievably close relationship with him, probably the closest that I've seen or know of. Maybe there was others, but you had one of the closest relationships. But I want to chime in on something Mitch said there. That romantic life that Alvarez lived as an artist, you don't see very often anymore, right? The modern world kind of dictates elsewise, right, Chad? You and I have talked about this, Chad, where that romantic idea of doing some of the works and doing some of the pieces, not everybody gets to live that kind of artistic life anymore. You read about it. Chad's been reading. I mean, he reads so much, guys. You guys would love all the stuff that he talks about and that he reads and he's obsessed with. But it's almost like a bygone thing, right, Charles? That kind of romantic version of what we think of art is kind of a bygone life, because look at what you're living the dream of so many artists, the professional, and you're sitting there telling them it's not always rosy, guys. It's tough. Mitch, you're saying the same thing, and I'm sure it wasn't for them either. But we're so fortunate to have the mentors. And I know that you guys, Charles, you talk about how you mentor up other artists. Mitch, I know you motivate and encourage others and bring them in on your scripts and your movies and your paintings, and you're telling so many stories. But that's one of the greatest honors I have of my life currently, is that we are motivating and encouraging young artists and people to get back into the creative arts. But Charles, what the heck do you have in your hands, man? What the heck is that?
I am cutting some, I think this is gutter guard.
Chicken wire?
I'm not sure. Is that chicken
wire?
No, this is not chicken wire. It's too small. I don't know.
But what are you going to use it for? What's the purpose of holding that?
It's thin. It's going to be like feather, something I can adhere clay to for little skinny tail feathers.
Oh, nice. Okay. So again, building out a structure as a support system. Very cool. Charles, we have a question for you.
Yeah.
Here we go. Chuck. So clearly that's Madron. Chuck, as a sculptor who creates pieces for clients, do you ever fear that your work is not good enough? Holy crap, this is a great question. Let me read that again. Charles, as a sculptor who creates pieces for clients, do you ever fear that your work is not good enough? As a young artist, I think most of us fear that we are not good enough to sell our work. Wow.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know if I ever really was concerned that I wasn't good enough at doing art, but definitely like good enough to sell art. There's a difference in those two things. And, the first time you ever sell some art and you put a price tag on it and you're like, I don't know, like $500. You just like put a number out there. The person's like, yeah. And you're like, okay, nice. It's sort of an experiment to start with. But then after you've done it long enough, you have some confidence in it I don't know if any of you guys run into this, but do you ever talk to people who absolutely don't know about art and they're blown away by a price and you're kind of like,
I can chime in on this.
Yeah.
I'll share a very good story. So as many of you know, and these gentlemen know, I went into what would you say? I went into marketing and advertising, not necessarily the fine arts. I went into, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't even know, the corporate arts, I guess, if you will, the corporate world. And I did that for, 10 to 15 years. And gentlemen, I can tell you, I sat in meetings where they would ask me about the price of a painting of mine. And I'd say, oh, it's $1,500. And they go, oh, wow, okay, that's not bad. And they go, how long did it take you to do? And it may have been a painting that I did, like 20 hours. That's a ripoff. You're ripping me off. That's a joke. I'm not going to pay that. And that's this. And those are the same people that will turn around and charge like $800 an hour to consult somebody else. You know what I mean? And I'm sitting there going, I'm like, or like I had a gentleman who was a roofing company, and and I said, hey, do you want to come and roof my house for me? And he's like, well, I'm going to charge XYZ. I said, that's a ripoff. You're only going to do a half a day's worth of work. And he's like, you understand? And I tell him, I go, you're paying for that 35 years that I've been working as an artist to be able to do it that quickly or to do it in that time frame. But yes, I have feared what Joe was asking, that my work wasn't good enough, or I couldn't validate the price of my work, right? Like I felt like I wasn't worthy of that price point. And that's such a shame. I think that's absolutely ridiculous. I see Mitch has got something coming here. He's going to give us something. But what are your thoughts on that, Mitch? And let me tell you, the corporate world devalues creativity.
Of course it does, but I'm also trying to figure out like how to answer that question and not be the biggest jerk ever. This is such a hard thing to answer, because there's always going to be the person like Charles is talking about and you're talking about, like the person that's like, I can't believe it's that expensive. And then there's the other person that's going to be like, oh, that's not expensive enough. And
absolutely,
you have to get comfortable enough. And you like, I feel like this comes from sports too. It's having that confidence. Like Charles and I never balked at any of that stuff. Like really, I never doubted myself ever with this, not once. You just got to find where you fit in. That's what it all comes down to, and just have that confidence. and knowing also that like after you sell stuff, this is a business. Like, don't ever forget that. Like, yes, like we love this thing. This is what our whole life is about, but you're a brand. Like, you're selling yourself, and prices go up. This is the business part of it. And I can't stand when, you know, people hear the price of something and they're like, how much is that? I'm like, do I come to your job and tell your boss that your salary is too high? Like, no. It's like, this is the price. If you like it, cool. If you don't, just keep it moving. Like, that's how this works.
And the confidence to be like, I mean, so this started with saying like, did I ever not have confidence in myself? But more like an understanding that you're not like, you ever hear like imposter syndrome?
Yes. We talk about this all the time.
Yeah. And just basically like, if I had done a sculpture when I was 23 and someone was like, wow, that's really expensive, I would have been like, you know, maybe kind of apologetic or like concerned or something. And now being like, look, if you don't know how much art costs, that's your issue, not mine. Like,
right. Absolutely.
This is obviously your first time. I'll hold your hand and walk you through it. This is how much this stuff costs. And my price is not expensive. Yeah.
You're going to learn today. And even further, that point, when you get into the business world and like how Seth was saying, you find out how much everything else costs. Why is this one of a kind, unique thing that can only be done by me not expensive? It should be expensive. It's supposed to be expensive.
Yep. Yeah. Well, and Chad, I'm throwing this one at you, man, because we've experienced this last week. We've been coaching up some teenage artist guys, and it's exactly what the two of you have been talking about, right? The difference between confidence and all this stuff. Chad, do you mind sharing the story about how you misspoke, right? But you didn't misspeak, but you misspoke because you are a wordsmith. You value each individual word. But guys, listen to this advice that he gave a young artist. She's brilliant. I mean, she is an absolute. I hope she's watching. You'll know who I'm talking. You are absolutely brilliant, but she lacks the ability to kind of communicate at a certain level. Chad, what did you say, and then why did you kind of go back on it? But why did you say what you said, and what was it? Because I think you said it beautifully, even though you didn't like the choice of words. Mitch, you would like his choice of words.
Yeah. So this young lady, she come in and show us her sketchbook and some of the watercolors she had done, and they're just, like Seth said, absolutely amazing. I mean, the sketchbook had everything from landscapes to portraits, trying different techniques and everything. And we're trying to encourage her, like, her sketchbook was top-notch, and it's one of those sketchbooks that should be seen by SCAD, other people as well. But she just had a badness about her and uncertainty, and some of that is with youth, because she's a very young lady. And so I told her, I said, you have to have also an arrogant humility. Like, you walk into the room and you believe that you are the best artist in that room, but then you also have humility to know that you're not at the same time. And I said that almost as an overreaction to how unsure she was of herself, because I wanted her to understand, like, when you walk in, you have to look people in the eye and believe in your ability and your talents that you have. And so I felt I really wrestled with that for the next couple of days, because for me, I do not like when an artist is arrogant. I do like when they're confident. That's very different. And I think what I was trying to communicate to her was confidence, in the sense that arrogance and humility kind of equal themselves out. And so just that, for her to walk in and not really wrestle with that imposter syndrome, to know that she's supposed to be there at that time in that place. Absolutely. And that she's talented enough to make whatever it is, whether it's to get into that college or get that job or sell a piece of work, that she is confident in her ability to do it. So yeah, I really wrestled with telling her to be arrogant, but that was not my intention. It was more to be confident in her.
Yeah, well, arrogant is different. You can. We played sports. We played with some really arrogant guys that, you know, you don't really care to talk too much. Yeah. You know, I'm sure none of us struggle with that. Like I shouldn't speak for everybody. Just knowing that I am the baddest dude that has ever held one of these things ever.
That's right.
I don't ever stray from that. So I know.
I knew
Mitch's
you'd get
confidence
together
is
that.
unique amongst all humans.
Yeah. Hey, it is what it is, man.
But
I'm not a jerk about it. I just know.
Well, I think Chad and I talk a lot about the idea that there are a lot of those who try to pass things off because they can't, right? Like they do certain styles or techniques because they're not able to produce at a level that they want to, right? And Mitch, you're in New York. I would assuming as a mecca of art, you probably see some of that. Charles down in the South, there's a lot of that too. And again, everybody can create and produce work as they see fit, right? I'm not knocking that, right? But I think there's a lot of people who try to pass it off, and you can see through that fake arrogance or that fake confidence. Does that make sense? And like you can totally see through it.
Sure. And you know what's funny that you say that? I don't know what made me think of this, but I was watching a College Game Day, and Nick Saban was talking about, he has a phrase, it's whistling by the graveyard. Ooh. And it's, because you're terrified, you just talk a lot, to fool yourself into thinking that you're not scared. It's like that sort of thing. Like
anybody who's sat through a college critique with like a full class critique knows what Mitch is talking about right now.
Yeah, man. Like, you can say whatever you want, but we both know that you're like, this is garbage, Yep. And that's the other thing too, that a lot of people don't talk too much about. Like, it's not about how awesome you are at the thing. It's how well you can sell what you're doing, because there are plenty of artists who can't do X, Y, and Z, but they make plenty of money.
Yep.
And it's about the art of the sale. So just get good at self-promotion. You have to be good at talking about what it is that you're doing.
Well, and I think for everybody, it's a difference, right? Like I know there are some artists that, they're very comfortable with where their skill level is, and what their capabilities are. I stand by the saying, ancora imparo, right? Like, still I am learning, the Italian for still I am learning. I don't think I'm ever going to stop learning. And I hope I don't ever stop learning. I hope I continue to improve. I remember, Mitch, I don't know if you remember this story, but I share this one quite a bit. Flip the hat around for this one. Do you remember one of the last paintings that Alvarez did, the Mayan god?
Of course, King Pakal.
Thank you. Do you remember when we went into the studio and he was sand belting that sucker down?
Yeah.
I mean, I remember thinking to myself in that moment, I don't know if I ever shared this with you, if I ever talked, I remember thinking in my moment, oh my God, he just destroyed a masterpiece. Like, he just destroyed a work that was absolutely stunning and gorgeous. And he looked, I remember I went in for a modeling study. He looked at me, he goes, I said, Alvarez, why did you do that? He goes, it wasn't perfect. It wasn't what I wanted it to be. And he just kept pushing himself to make it where he did want it to be. And I hope I continue that. I'm challenging myself on this portrait here. I'm scared to death of this thing. And I'm very fortunate, Charles, that I don't have a deadline on it, that I don't have to, push this out there or get this to a client. But I am absolutely terrified of this thing. And I keep thinking back to that moment. So what, Seth? Suck it up. If you screw it up, sand it down like Alvarez did and do it again.
Yeah, because there were times with him when he was teaching us that he would come up behind me and, like, because he knew how to get me going. Like, he knew how to, fire me up. He'd be like, stop being a chicken shit and just – and I'd be like – You want to fight? You want to fight me? So, it's that, but it's also that, see, that's the confidence that we're talking about too. He was never afraid. And I'm so glad that he imparted that on me. And Charles is like that too. I will sand all of this off because I'm so confident that if I did it before, I can do it again. I'm not worried about starting over ever. That's why sometimes it takes a year to paint something. I don't care. Like, my wife will come home from work and she'll be like, oh my God, why is that canvas blank? And I'm like, because it wasn't right.
Yep. Well, and you know what's amazing, guys? Alvarez was right. When he redid that painting and finished it, it was so much better. It was exceptional. He knew it and he did it and he made it right. And it was absolutely one of the coolest moments of my life. Along with tonight, actually. And so I just can't, we've got just a couple minutes. I'm going to kind of throw it around for everybody's last little comments. I hope you guys had as much fun watching us work and create as I've had. And I think these guys have had too. 2 hours goes by really, really fast. But guys, we are so thankful that you've joined us this evening. It has been a spectacular experience having two award-winning artists join the Visual Arts Academy and Studio Live. We've got Charles Pate, who's an award-winning sculptor, painter, storyteller. We've already talked about all the narratives and everything, and just a spectacular human being. And we've got Mitchel Coffman out in New York. I could say the exact same things. Multifaceted artist, spectacular storyteller, just wonderful human being across the board. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining Chad and I this evening and just talking through your processes, answering these great questions, and being a part of this community that we're trying to grow and build here. And, for me, thank you for supporting me throughout my entire life since you've known me. I mean, you guys have just been wonderfully supportive. That brotherhood never leaves. Joe, thanks for jumping on. Everybody else that jumped on. Guys, it's absolutely a wonderful experience. Chad, thanks for dealing with all of our crazy stories and letting us reminisce this evening. But I'm going to throw it around the room. Any last-minute thoughts, guys? We've got a couple minutes left, but any last-minute thoughts? Chuck, Mitch, anything you guys want to throw out there for our students or for our watchers and listeners right now?
Chuck, you want it? You want it first?
Man, I would just say keep on doing what you're doing. If you learned anything tonight from us, it was just that the continuing to work is going to be super valuable for you, no matter where you're trying to go with it or what your end goal is. The end goal can be different, but just continuing to work is the way to get there. And I hope you all have me back, Chad. Next time I want to come back and we'll talk some theological artwork. That'd be a good.
Yeah, I would love that.
There's a lot of times where I don't get to be on these live sessions. Charles, if I'm ever going to miss one, if you're okay with it, I'd love to reach out, see if you and Chad can jump on. I think that would be an amazing session, Chad. I think that would be a joy for you and something that you would absolutely love. We before I go to Mitch, because I know he's thinking through it and he's going through Mitch's thought process. But Joe Madron, one of our other fellow teammates and lifelong friends, you guys are a true inspiration for all us artists. Love you guys. Joe, back at you, brother. We're so glad you joined us this evening. Thank you for all the continued support and everything. But Mitch, anything you want to close out for us, man?
Oh yeah, just keep in mind to all the younger people out there that everybody's work looks different.
Oh yeah.
You know what? It's going to take you a long time to figure out what your style is, and you have an awesome teacher in Seth and Chad as well. Like, if there's ever been anybody that's committed to something, it's Seth. When he says he's going to do something, he sees it all the way through. That's been a character trait he's had since I've known him. Even when he's annoying, because he can be annoying as hell. He has everyone's like best in mind with whatever he does. So I'm really proud of you, man, that you and Thomas have started the academy. It's such a cool thing. I'll never forget living with you for that 1 year when I would see you maybe every weekend or so, even though we played sports together. It was man. And that bloody glove story really did happen. And the part that Seth did omit from that part is we almost got into a fight with the entire school that was there.
Yes.
And all of a sudden, all these art guys that hated violence were tough guys. And I had to be the person to stop them from fighting everybody. It was a total role reversal because I was always the first person to pick fights with people.
That is a true component of the story. And there's many more stories that we could probably share, guys. 2 hours is not long enough for the experiences and the life that we've been able to have together. We're so grateful for everything. I'd love to have you guys back. And as we continue to grow, we do have the gallery upstairs. We'd love to invite other artists on for the live sessions. We'd love to eventually bring some of these artists down, maybe get you guys in here for some workshops, some training sessions. Charles, I'd love to pick your wisdom and your brain on how to launch, a sculpting department here. All of these different things, guys. We're so grateful for all of your input. Chad, you are the most exceptional instructor. We're so grateful to have you as part of the Visual Arts Academy and Studio. Ladies and gentlemen, 2 hours goes by in a blink when you're having a blast, and this was one of the most fun events I've ever had in my life. I'm so grateful to everybody that's watched and joined. You can watch this. It'll be posted up here as soon as we get off. But thank you guys for joining. Mitch, Charles, thank you for the time. Thank you for the wisdom, the guidance. Chad, thank you as always for everything you guys do. Ladies and gentlemen, that's a wrap on VAAS Live with Charles Pate Jr. and Mitchel Coffman. Thank you all for watching.